Hey, welcome to another video. My name is Neil Chambers. I'm the co-founder of Chambers Design. We are a landscape design and urban design build company based in northern New Jersey. We have started doing a little series about how to envision your dream project, and we did a video a couple of days ago about just some sources of where you can find images that can help you, inspire you, and help you communicate with your designer to give them a better sense about what you're looking for. Today, I thought what I would do is walk you through a project, or walk you through an image that was given to us by a potential client, and how I used that image to really create a meeting with them that was really helpful and informative, and then took us from kind of the image itself to a really strong concept for the design. So for this project, they called me and they wanted to redo the front area of their house, basically just a stair and a walkway. And this is actually a house that was in South Orange, New Jersey. This is the image that they sent me. And when they sent it to me, I think this is a good start. You know, they were basically wanted to do something really modern. They wanted really big pavers. I think they liked the clean lines here. They wanted lighting, and this was what they had found and they sent me. And so when I met with them, I took this image and I started to really want to figure out and walk through it with them in terms of what are the elements we see, what are the things that we could do that could potentially be a little bit better than this image. And then I wanted to also show them ideas about projects that had the same feel as this, but maybe a little bit more pushed a little bit further in some regards, or might be a little more appropriate for a front entrance. So the first thing we did is I just started to highlight the lines themselves, and what makes this image seem so modern. And the first thing I did was just to look at the lines, and that the way they are organized, they are very squared off with only a few kind of angular image lines, and that really includes just the lines along the steel edging. You can see that looks like triangles. You know, and this was one of the first images when we started talking, like, you know, and I started to ask, are the lines themselves something that really speaks to you as a owner and what you're really interested in, you know, because sometimes it's the lines, sometimes it's the materials, and I'm trying to really kind of pull out of a client like what it is exactly, so we can start to really narrow in and focus on specifics. So when we start to put it into their yard, it's not just a replica of an image, but it's actually something that becomes theirs and highlights the things that they see. So the other thing I wanted to highlight, because they did want lighting, I wanted to look at the lighting itself. These lights are not necessarily lights that I would use. I don't actually know the brand or whatnot, but they look like lights that you would get at a Home Depot or something like that. So they have a spike on the bottom. The black looks more like a plastic than it does a metal or some kind of heavy duty material. So, you know, the problem with that is, and you can see that they're already leaning. You can see that they're not straight, they're not plumb. When we install lights, we always put a footing on the bottom of that light so that it stays nice and straight for as long as possible, because lights get banged up. You know, when your lawn company comes, they might hit it with a weed whacker or a lawnmower, and if they're not footed, they don't have a footing, they'll move. Also, just the way that, you know, it gets hot and cold and freezes and thaws, it'll also move it. So you can see that's already happening with these. And if they're made out of plastic, they will crack. And if they're made out of some types of even kind of low-grade metals, they start to warp and whatnot. So we started, but this gave us an opportunity to talk about lighting and what might be some other options. And that, did they want just two lights? Were the lights really what they were looking at? What we found when I started talking to them, I found out that it's not the lighting itself, but that it does have lighting. And then it was about materials. So, you know, the thing about this is that there's a steel element to this, and this is a really tall, this is a really tall edge for steel, and it creates some really kind of sharp edges, especially where it's not triangular, it's a rectangle close to that one light. It looks like it's actually acting as a retaining wall on part of it, and then they're just bringing that line back out and not sloping it back down. When we start talking about the steel itself, that was a really important factor, and we started talking about what type of edging would be appropriate, and heights and thicknesses, and how to install, and that this may be Corten steel. It's what it looks like, which will have a patina of rust on it just over a year. It'll start to have that nice brown copper looking color come on. It's what most people use. It's this looks like it's fair. I mean, it's interesting. It looks like it's been installed for a while and it hasn't gotten that patina yet. So, we really talked about that. I mean, do you want it to look steel after 5 years, or do you want it to have that patina? And that was a really important factor for them as well. And then the other thing was the pavers themselves, which when we started talking to this client, it was the kind of factor of all of the pieces of this image, is that they wanted big pavers. And the biggest problem with pavers is that, especially these, which you actually would call a slab versus a paver, is that this size of slab is not readily available. And this looks like it's poured concrete, so they probably built forms out and then put the concrete down. And it also looks like it's just concrete. There's no pigment in it, so it doesn't have a color to it. It looks like it's been brushed like with a broom to kind of give it a little bit of texture, which you really need to do for concrete, or it can get wet and get really slippery if it's too smooth. So they will brush it to make it have a little bit of a texture so you don't slip. Not my first choice. Instead, when we were talking with the client, the thing that they began to reiterate over and over and over was they wanted it to be very clean. They wanted the lines really clean. And so when we started looking at these pavers, the thing that we really started looking at is not just the pavers themselves, but what's surrounding them. So, the next image was kind of highlighting that the ground cover there was gravel in one area, and then there was mulch on the other, and was that important to them or what? That we found out that was not a big factor. And then the other thing was plants. They didn't necessarily want to trade out their plants, and so it was a kind of for us, we always like to add plants and kind of change up a planting plan, because when you do modern walkways, a planting plan that has also a contemporary modern feel really accents that design decision. And these plants they're okay. They look a little small. They're not really covered. There's a lot of other examples. I'll show you that. And then the other thing we looked at was the actual spacing between those pavers, because that's a big factor. So if we back up, we look at it, you can see that the actual space between each paver is really fat. That looks like it's about, it could be as much as 2 inches, and it hasn't been maintained. You can see that it hasn't been maintained. There's like moss growing in areas, and there's grass growing in areas. And so, that was, how important was that? What was their vision for that area to be? Would it be dirt? Would it be grass? Would it be riverstone? What would it be? And so when we were going through, I want to make sure that I highlighted that, because that's a big factor of that overall design. So what I did do is that I did bring a couple of examples of front walkways that could be a little bit more in line with this idea of modern and contemporary and really clean. And this was just one of them. And you can see that the paver itself is smaller. It's a smaller unit, but they're pushed into each other, and it really does create a really nice line. You can see that joint line going all the way to the front door. And then there is a little space, and you see that there's grass planted in different areas, but it just has a much better kind of contemporary and modern clean feel to it. It's very simple. This is actually a concrete walkway. Again, much cleaner. I don't think it has pigment either, but the way that it is poured and the way that it's treated inside its form has a much better feel than the one that they were showing me, and the way it kind of moves through. Again, this has a portico that moves into some stairs, which is another thing I wanted to talk to them about. Was they did have to replace stairs, and I was talking to them about maybe concrete stairs, if that might be a way to meld those different materials and elements of the front entrance together. And then we looked at other options about how to look at planting. Also, since steel was such a big factor for them, I showed them this image that shows the steel edging going across and being the riser of the stair. And we've done this a lot. It's a really gorgeous way of kind of accenting and the face of, or the side of the paver, but it becoming the riser of your stair. It's a really cool way of doing it. And then on the left hand side, how we can integrate lights into a planting and then use river stone and a steel edging and then the pavers, and how that becomes a full element within it. And since we were only doing an entryway, really looking at the details was a really important factor for this. This is just another example. Like the image that they had sent us had a retaining wall, and I wanted to make sure that they weren't thinking about retaining walls, or if they were, like giving them an example of what a steel retaining wall could be. This was too big for them. It wasn't a good option, a good pick for their site specifically, but I think it was helpful to show them what Corten steel would look like after a couple of, after a year, even 2 years. When I showed up, I had examples of materials, and so this is a product that I really like, really beautiful. I've used a lot, and it's a big slab paver as an option. They wanted to go even bigger, and this is the catch when it comes to finding images online and then talking with your designers about it. So they wanted really big pavers, and the thing is, like, they're just not available in our area. I could find them and have them shipped in or freighted in, but that just increases the cost so dramatically that it just blows the budget out. So I was trying to show them options of what could be done. These are pretty big. You can get 3 foot by 2 foot slabs of this type of a paver. This is a Para, which is a Teco block product. I also wanted to just make sure that that was what they wanted, and showed them another option of a smaller kind of rectangular paver, also by a Teco block that I've used a lot. Very modern, really like this, really gives a really nice feel to it. One of the last things I wanted to talk to them about was lighting. In the original design, or the original image that they sent me, there was the 2 lights that were dark or black, and they were kind of leaning. What I wanted to show them was an option like this, which I've used a lot. This is actually from a pool project that we did, and the photo on the image is the pool deck that's going into a planted area, and we have these lights. They're just really gorgeous. They're titanium. They're almost white. They're almost gray. They really read as metal from a distance, and they're hollow, so the light kind of comes down and washes the sides of the interior, and it's just a really beautiful light. It's a lot more elegant, a lot more sophisticated. And I was trying to take their temperature on that as well, and showed them this as an option. They liked it, but they didn't love it, and I think that was important to know, that what the direction they were wanting to do. And so, I mean, that's kind of what I wanted to cover today, just kind of like a really basic understanding about how like an image really can help kind of a design process, that with that image we're able to really start to investigate and provide a little bit of direction at our very first initial consultation, because that will really start to move a project forward. There's a lot of other things that we talked about in that project in terms of plantings and grasses and a whole list of other things. In our next video about envisioning your dream project, we're going to go over a bigger component of a master plan, looking at how a first project or a first meeting after the initial consultation looks when we start to really analyze a site and start to really kind of get into some of the really interesting design elements that can go into a yard. Until then, check out our website at chambersdesign.net. Also, we're on Instagram. Our username is Design for Nature. Also, check out our blog, which is chambersdesign.net/yard blog, and we'll see you next time.